Heat and DSM-5, general pathogenesis, general causality model 01. We will now take a look at how to apply the general causality model, which is a part of pathogenesis process of heat. And what I have done is, out of DSM, there are about 17 chapters where therapy can contribute substantially. Rest of the chapters are very bio-heavy, where little therapy can do. So I have taken these 17 chapters where therapy can contribute substantially and go over how to apply the general causality model to these 17 chapters. Similarly, we will take up each element of pathogenesis of heat and apply it to these 17 chapters. So if we look at heat, the heat system has a very distinct phase called pathogenesis. So you have case history, diagnosis, pathogenesis. And pathogenesis itself constitutes of 7 elements. And this is the heart of heat in terms of causality finding. And then you have the holistic healing in heat. So there are, if you look at the heart of the heat, it is pathogenesis and healing. So we are going into pathogenesis. The pathogenesis goes into diagnosis, story of symptoms, event causation, and so on. The first two are not very different from the classical route that we take, except for a few differences which I have elaborated before. What is so different about heat from all existing approaches is 3.3 to 3.7. So we will first take up 3.3, and this 3.3 is applying event causation model to the 17 chapters of DSM, how the model applies to the 17 chapters. And once we are done with it, we'll take up general elemental analysis for 17 chapters, then essential effect system for 17 chapters, then focused elemental analysis for 17 chapters, and then holistic spool analysis for 17 chapters. So this will help us apply and build skills on how to apply the pathogenesis part of heat system onto DSM, DSM-5. So today we'll look at event causation 3.3. The 3.3 model of event causation is a philosophical model applied to the context of psychopathology. The model is based on the primal question, why does any event happen at all? And what are the generic causation factors of any event? And they are listed out in this model as being 11 generic factors that cause the happening of any event. And since psychopathology also is an event in the universe, this general model would be applicable to that context also. So let us look at how this model is applied. And this will apply to 17 chapters of DSM. Which are the 17 chapters? These are the ones: schizophrenia, spectrum, and other psychotic disorders. Starting from chapter 2 of section 2 and going on with a few omissions in between, to paraphilic disorders. So these are the 17 chapters of DSM to which we will apply the event causation model. So let us go one by one into the chapters. Let us take up chapter 2 of DSM. Chapter 1 is neurocognitive, very bio heavy. We start with chapter 2, schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. In that chapter, we have these disorders: the delusional disorder, brief psychotic disorder, schizophreniform, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, catatonia, psychotic disorder due to any other medical condition. Will not take up this. And schizotypal, which will take up in personality disorders. So this part will take up today. Application of general causality model to this. So let us go to the general causality model. How do we apply this to the disorders we have listed out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First, for all the 17 chapters that we are going through, let me make a few general comments. Out of this general model, certain causality factors are insignificant most of the time, and we'll take them as insignificant for all the 17 chapters. Let me just cover them with a different color. If I bring them together, so this is how it would look like. Karma created by the principle, journey of the universe, chance, freedom of reality. Usually they will not be factors which are very important in terms of causality of psychopathology. So we'll be dealing with these 7 elements. And by and large, when we talk of laws of nature, which we take up in science as the causal factors, indicated by all the schools of psychoanalysis, and by psychiatry and neurology. They would work largely involving the karma of others, free will of others, free will of self, and karma of self. So when I say law of nature, in general, except for a few instances where it is only the genetic predisposition at work and the environment does not play a role at all, barring those instances, the unfolding of law of nature always is in association and in context of karma of self, karma of others, free will of self, free will of others. So this is how it will be. So let us now look at application of this general causality factor. So the first part here, delusional disorder. Does this chapter as a whole have the element of karma of self as an important element? And the answer would be, from a holistic standpoint, yes. From a holistic standpoint, most psychological sicknesses will have an element of the karma of the self. In a few cases, it would be journey of the self. So let us go into this one. Delusional disorder. First, can it be journey of the self? Journey of the self largely will be a factor in brief psychotic disorder or in some forms of catatonia. But in schizoaffective, schizophreniform, schizophrenia, delusional disorder, the probability that journey of the self can be a factor that somebody has come to experience these things is very low. Laws of nature, yes. Karma of self, yes. Karma of others, a very large amount. Free will of self, yes. Free will of others, very large proportion. So the quite a big proportion will be, the highest will be of the laws of nature, free will of others. Second, karma of self, or rather laws of nature, karma of self, free will of others, and free will of self. Can we have suprahuman forces and beings from a holistic standpoint, not from a scientific standpoint, obviously? Is the suprahuman forces and beings, they can come in on the onset of sickness, or they may be the causal factors in a minority of cases. And those who know how to make out can make out this being a causal factor. Since most of us don't know it, and we are not even clear whether the belief is legitimate or offensive, most of us drop this, and it's better to drop this causality. But if somebody knows, we can take it up, and the moment he takes it up, certain other roots of healing open up. And we have to be very careful here not to step into medieval superstition as we try to move from the conventional to the holistic. So in delusional disorder, karma of the self, law of nature, karma of others, free will of others will be very important. In certain cases, suprahuman forces and beings also can be important causal factors. In case of brief psychotic disorder, journey of the self can be a important factor. Others, laws of nature, karma of self, free will of others, free will of self, they can be important factors. And the moment we see these are the important factors, how does it help us in terms of healing? For each of this, there is something opens up to add to the basket of healing. Once we have journey of self, it can be brought into discussion that maybe you have come to experience this. And it is not as thrust upon you despite your wish as consciously you believe it to be. It's worth exploring if you really wish to get out of it or to explore this experience. So that becomes one more tool in therapy. Laws of nature, of course, conventional research goes on. Karma of the self, to overcome this, we have tools in the spiritual area, tools of service, giving to others, meditation, visualization, mantra, idol therapy, and so on. Energy healing also. Karma of others, tools can be given to others, certain things can be done by us, by the person. Suprahuman forces and beings, those who know, can help create processes and tools to overcome this. And this too, they need psychoanalytic and cognitive clearing to generate more insight, to be more conscious, more comprehensive grasp of things. And as much it can be given to others, one can give. So it opens up the moment we create this, apart from therapy, which we would do if we go only by laws of nature. If we go only by this, we would go only into therapy and psychiatry. Other areas won't open up. In catatonia, in certain forms of schizophrenia with negative features, which I call happy schizophrenia, there can be a very strong element of the journey of self, that one wants to experience that state of bliss, primary narcissism, no struggle for quite a long time. Second, bipolar. In 1 and 2, journey of self is not important. In cyclothymia, journey of self can be an important factor. The element of suprahuman forces and beings can be a very important element in bipolar. In case of major depressive disorder, it would be heavy karma. In case of dysthymia, it can be journey of the self, important element. In premenstrual, this may have to do with laws of nature primarily. And disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, this may involve the suprahuman forces and beings. In anxiety, in case of specific phobia, the karmic part will be very heavy. In case of substance, medication-induced anxiety, journey of self can be an important element. In all other parts, the karma would be very important. Free will of others would be the second most important. Laws of nature, of course, are there. And in anxiety, the presence of other beings less often as causal factors, more often as coming to reside post anxiety starts. That is quite common. Yes, and when we talk laws of nature, all the schools of psychoanalysis, CBT, all the traditional therapy schools that we have, all get covered under laws of nature. The entire area of psychiatry, neurology, all the sciences that we have, they also get covered under the second factor of laws of nature. In OCD, OC spectrum disorders, in body dysmorphic disorder, the karmic part is exceedingly heavy. In hoarding disorder, the karmic part is extremely heavy. In trichotillomania, the laws of nature, especially of neurological events and the weight that is incident upon the nerves from the top, that is very important. In other forms of the classical OC spectrum, the karma would be the most important part, followed by the free will of others, laws of nature. Here, in 1 and 2, reactive attachment disorder and disinhibited social engagement disorder, the journey of self also is an important element. Rest of the disorders, we have karmic component very heavy, laws of nature as usual, the karma of the free will of others, the karma of the free will of self, as usual the hierarchy follows. The suprahuman beings and forces component is much less important here. In disassociation, the journey of self and the karmic component is very large. The element of suprahuman forces and beings also is extremely important. Rest of the factors, of course, are as important as always. The karmic component, the laws of nature, free will of others, free will of self. Especially dissociative identity disorder, the element of suprahuman forces and beings is extremely important. And in depersonalization and derealization, if the person has a spiritual orientation, then the journey of self element is exceedingly important. Here, the karmic component and the laws of nature is most important. Other factors are secondary. By this, I mean the karmic component, the laws of nature, free will of others, free will of self. Rest of the factors are secondary. Feeding and eating disorder. Here, the experience of the self is an important component in terms of causality. Also important are the karmic elements, but not so much as the most important element here would be the laws of nature, the free will of others, the free will of self, followed by the karmic element. The karmic element is less important here. This is more of this incarnation's outcome. Some component of past incarnation will come up in Pika, but rest of them is more of this generation, this incarnation's doing. And there the laws of nature, free will of others, free will of self is very important. Here the karmic elements from the past are very important. Self journey is not important. Suprahuman forces and beings also is very important. In this situation, the suprahuman forces and beings part is important. Self journey is not important. The laws of science, the karma of the self, the free will of others, free will of self, as usual, is in the same hierarchy. This is heavily karmic. Journey of the self and suprahuman forces and beings are secondary. This is heavily karmic. Here, the journey of the self is important. It is heavily karmic, and presence of suprahuman forces and beings also is important. Apart from the classical central causality factors, which are laws of nature, laws of science, free will of others, free will of self, karma of self, karma of others. So this is how the general causality model applies. If we see over the 17 chapters, we see the center always is this. The center is the laws of nature, free will of others, the environment, what people do to us, karma of self, number 3, how we interpret what people do to us, free will of self, what do we do to get out of it, if at all we do something, karma of others, 5th, suprahuman forces and beings, 6th, and journey of the self is 7th. So if I was to rearrange this, it would be like this. So this would be the hierarchy, that laws of nature, which include everything we discuss in psychiatry, psychotherapy, neurology. That would be Number one, free will of others, what they do to us. Number two, karma of the self, how we process it, what baggage we bring in the light of which we process. Free will of self, what do we do? Suprahuman forces and beings, journey of self and karma. This usually is the hierarchy in which the factors of causality impact the psychopathology. Most of the cases, it is this 5, 6, 7 don't come into the picture. In some cases, one of them does, or maybe a couple of them do. So this is how the general causality model can be applied. And for each of these factors, when we look at holistic healing, there are ways to address each of these issues, which makes the healing basket, which is with its constituent tools, much more comprehensive, open, holistic compared to our classical basket. Thank you.